Yo, podcasters, this is About the Business, where we talk about entrepreneurship, community development, growth, and that thing that we all need to know about, the money game. So let's get to it. What's up, podcast world? It's your boy Thomas B, back again with another episode About the Business. And I have here with me a very, very special guest. She's the founder of the We Speak Foundation. She's the author of two books. One of her books you can get right now on Amazon is called The Black Dialect. Man, it's an awesome book. You all have to go get it. But we're going to get on into this. She's going to tell you about her other book a little bit later on in the episode. But yeah, we're going to get on into this. So how you doing on today, Kyerra?
I'm doing fine. And first off, I want to say just thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So, for our viewers that don't really know you, can you just give them a quick rundown of who you are and what you're about?
Of course. So my name is Kyerra Johnson. I was originally born in East St. Louis, Illinois, born and raised. I studied at one of the few HBCUs in Alabama at Concordia College, Selma, and I would eventually go on to study political science and criminal justice at the University of South Alabama. And those studies would eventually lead me to working for the state of Missouri, starting off as a court clerk, so starting way at the bottom, and then promoting on to the Supreme Court of Missouri, where I've been a management analyst as of recently and working in pretrial services. So it was early on in college where I would start on my vision of my current foundation, where I'm the current owner and founder of We Speak Foundation.
Okay, that's what's up. So tell us a little bit about the foundation.
Sure, I'd love to. So We Speak Foundation, first off, I always like to say, is a Christ-centered organization, and it focuses on the needs of lower income communities across America. We use volunteer work to network with our other organization, and that's to build bridges and community resources. We host a variety of different programs where members of communities can sign up for our program and join our efforts to help build resources and grow the efforts of communities like the ones that I come from, like East St. Louis. And so that is ultimately where it has birthed from. And again, we continue to build bridges, and we use our suicide prevention. Like we go on different radio shows and different podcasts and things like that to bring awareness to suicide prevention and mental health.
Okay, that's what's up. So, what's your whole overall vision for the We Speak Foundation? I know you do a lot of work in the community, and I see your other podcasts, and I know you advocate a lot for mental illness and everything. So, where do you see your vision for the future?
Definitely. Honestly, like I'll go back and just say like what started off as just like me doing motivational speaking birthed into an atmosphere of me wanting to do more. In college, it was really difficult for me to find a major. Like when I was coming into high school, like I just knew that I wanted to go into communication and journalism. But I didn't really see how I would reach my full potential, because it was just like, it's really hard for journalists. If you can see now what the media looks like and how we look at our journalists now, like, with fake news and things like that come about, like it's really become even harder for journalists to tell real stories. And I think for the people to kind of understand and accept. And so I was inducted into a honor society in college, where I heard a variety of different speakers. And the one that caught my ears was the one where a gentleman stated to me, what your passion is what keeps you up at night. It's something that, you can't sleep. It's hard to focus. And, it's where your aspirations truly will lie. And I thought about me as a kid being a trauma survivor when I experienced the death of my mother and father. That was a homicide suicide. And I was 8 years old when I experienced that, and, watched the entire thing where my mother would be shot 7 times and my father himself would take his own life. And within that evening, when the officers came, which was very late, which that in itself was hurtful. But to see the looks on their faces when they came in, it was a very nonchalant type of look. Like, it really did not show a lot of remorse to what seemed like the most horrific event that was happening in my life. And so after fighting through that, I would later experience the death of a kid that I grew up with. He was recently released from prison, and he had aspirations of going on and working with his father, just, pretty much getting out of the neighborhood to start a new life for his daughter. And he was walking to the store. It was no further than, the 43rd Street where we were from. And he was shot multiple times and was killed. And so it hurt me. And I grew up, playing on the porch with this kid. Like, we drank Capri Suns, we played and raced out in the streets. And to know that he could never fulfill his dreams, it absolutely bothered me. And I wanted to know why this was happening and how to stop it. And I learned that it was about the resources. It was about getting people the help that they deserve to stop and help end the cycle that continues in the communities like ours. So moving forward with those visions, like I said earlier, it's always going to be about building bridges with other people in our communities that have similar aspirations, and us working together to help build the resources that our community will need.
Okay, that's what's up. So I know on your website, you have a lot of videos and of interviews that you did before, and I actually went through almost all of them and watched almost all your other interviews. It's real nice. And you said a little bit about the trauma that you've been through. And I think I heard that on one of your other interviews. So with that, talking about the shooting of your mother and you said your stepfather?
Yes.
So were you actually around for all that?
So yeah, it literally is not a memory I think I will ever forget in my entire life. Mm-hmm. What happened is my mother, she was coming into the door at the time. My mother was 26 years old. My father was 29. Both, very collegiate people. My mother, I think she was actually coming from school at the time. And she was just arriving to pick us up. Where my father, we witnessed him open the door to my mom. And my mom walks in. She checks her mail like normal. And the night, honestly, to me, it didn't seem right at the time because I saw the look on my father's face and he was just in disgust. And I couldn't necessarily understand why. And I can remember my mother, she looked at me and she was like, "Don't look at your dad that way." And I was like, I think my face was showing exactly what I was feeling. And it was not long after that she had gone upstairs and we heard the first gunshot, where my grandmother and I, we were all, we would all walk upstairs and we were like, what's going on? Like, we're trying to check and see. And at this point, he was holding on to my mother. And my grandmother, she was saying to him, she said, "Listen, you can't talk to her like this. If you're going to talk, let's all come downstairs, give you guys a second, and let's go downstairs." And in that moment, I didn't want to leave because it was just no, we just heard a gunshot. We shouldn't be going back downstairs. We should be walking them down the steps. And no sooner than we got back down to start eating is when we heard more gunshots. And at that point, we would run to our stairs, which was kind of located in the back of our house. And my mother had on a leather jacket. And my father was holding onto the leather jacket. And she kind of ran, kind of pulled herself out of the leather jacket, trying to run towards the front door of our house. And instinctually, it was well, I should try to open the door. But at the time, it was one of those really strong doors. And I was unable to open the door. And I can remember that he was coming down, had a 9mm, and was shooting straight at her. And I'm standing right next to her. And at this point, she's telling me to move. And I'm looking at her no, and he's reloading. This is, what I'm saying? I mean, it was just insane, the amount of just anger that was going on in that moment. And she was shot right there again. And I think right after that, she was trying to apologize. She just kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." He's like, "You're not sorry. You're not sorry." And he would pull her back by her collar. And at that point, I ran to get my little brother. I was able to put him into the basement of our house. I ran to try to call the police. I was like, hey, like, my dad shooting my mom. We had, 1414 North 43rd Street. Can you get the police or whatever? And I hang up the phone to try to like go back and, check on this incident about what's happening. And he pushes my grandmother down to the floor. At this point, my mother's already been shot more than a few times, but drags her into the bathroom, into the bathtub, where he continues to shoot her, and then he shoots himself. And ultimately, that was the end of it. I can just remember hearing the water run. And it was just like, I'm 8 years old. I'm a kid. I'm beating on the floor, like crying, like he killed my mom. He killed my mom. And so it was heart-wrenching. It very much is, like I said, it's still vivid. I can still see every moment of that incident that happened.
Wow. Man, that's a lot to go through when you're a young kid and have to navigate through life, and that's a lot to go through. So
it is. It is.
So how was growing up and like dealing with all that growing up? How was that? Like, did it affect you?
It was pretty difficult because I didn't know how to go back to my friends after that, because everybody knows. I mean, it's East St. Louis. It's not really, it's not a huge city. So everybody knows what's going on. It's in the newspaper. And especially because of who they were and what they were doing. Like my dad was a member of Phi Beta Sigma. My mother was an AKA. She was studying to be a doctor at the time. He was a college professor. So it was in the news as to what was going on. And it was really hard to adjust to being in the classroom. I remember I had to transfer schools. We went through custody battles, between my stepfather's parents, my mother's, her side of the family, and even my own father, came into the picture for me, seeing him for the first time. And it was just a lot to try to adjust to. So growing up through this period, I go through a course of a lot of manipulation, like a lot of going back and forth and trying to just figure out who I was. And it was difficult for a very long time to find the truth as to what was really like, who were the true real players in my life, like who was really showing me love at that time. And, at the very end of it, it was my grandparents. It was his mother that played one of the most critical roles in my life at that time. And I really appreciate her to this day because she stuck by me knowing the trauma that I was going through. And I mean, when I tell you I gave it to her, like, you just think about any teenager, but then put trauma on top of that and it being her son. And so she took the grunt end of that and she carried it well. She never talked about any other side of my family, and at least not to my face, but she kept it kosher. And I can appreciate that from her. And I think I've grown a lot because of who she was to me.
Right. And that's amazing because your organization, your foundation is not just something that was put together. It's something that's like put together because it's a long, hard backstory, and you're actually trying to do something to change the community. And you out here putting like podcasts and just people hearing your story is real encouraging because I've heard a little bit of your story through one of the interviews that you put out. I'm like, wow, I always see her smiling. Like I would have never thought that was something that she had went through because I didn't know. And like that's real strong. And I applaud you for that. And I'm glad it's, people like you that can tell their story and create, an outlet for somebody else to be able to look at and be able to even talk to, because I'm sure you have, your doors, your ears open up for anybody else that's going through it because you went through it, you can relate more. So that's amazing. That's amazing that that you even still here, still strong through it all. And I'm glad you even made your foundation. I'm so happy about that. So I guess moving on to the next question. I know I mentioned earlier about your book. Can you give us a little bit about your book?
Yes, so I am super excited about this book because I feel like not only is it a book that gives you the truth behind a lot of the history that we weren't told growing up. Like, you know, in our, what's not in our textbooks, what wasn't, you know, introduced to us. Even, you know, like I said, I went to East St. Louis Senior High School. East St. Louis is 98% African American community. But even, you know, and going to classes and understanding what our history was, there were things that were still left out. And so I was able to find a lot of that history and be able to put it in this book, as well as give my thoughts behind it. So ultimately, for instance, like there's one that talks about what happened after slavery. Like a lot of people don't know like what happened after the slaves were free. And this is where you see a lot of the slaves, like they migrate to areas like Memphis, Tennessee. And what would happen is that originally they were supposed to get, you know, essentially like their 40 acres and a mule, that it was special field order number 15, that they were supposed to receive a certain amount of land that pretty much extended all the way to the Carolinas, from like Georgia to the Carolinas or something like that. And they did not ever receive this land because the order, I think that the gentleman, he was actually killed. And what happened is a lot of the now freed slaves, they moved to areas like Memphis to try to find, like, you know, their new life, this new element of freedom that America says that they have. And what they find is that they are now systemically pressured into going back into enslavement in so many ways. So what it was called was, what was created was vagrancy laws. And these laws ultimately said that, hey, if you don't have a bank account, if you don't have any money, if you don't have a job, you need to come back, and you get fined for this. You would get fined for not having a job, not having a home, and different things like that. And to think that they were slaves, how much did they really know? They didn't know how to read. You know, they didn't have any of those resources. So ultimately, they were put back onto these plantations where they would be sharecroppers and different things like that. They would work back into the fields, and they would be tricked. They would be tricked as tenants to continue working on contracts where they would say, well, you know, your fine is $150. And they would have to work and work and work till they paid off this $150. Well, they never could pay off this $150, so to speak. And that's just an example. And so it's things like that where I would put in my own kind of viewpoints about how I felt about this history and how it affected me. But I also give the readers the opportunity in the book to journal their thoughts as well and ask them questions about what they're thinking about these events. So it goes on not just to that, but it touches on the medical field. It touches on like vaccines, like histories about Henrietta Lacks that a lot of people don't really know who she is, but she's responsible ultimately for a lot of the cures that we have today with polio, the polio vaccine, the flu vaccine. They literally all have derived from using her cells to help create these vaccines, this one Black woman. And so that history is in there. Again, I give my point of view about how I feel, and I give the reader the opportunity to journal their thoughts. And what do you think, like, in order to stop things like this from happening? Because her family did not receive compensation, even though I think the vials for her sales would cost anywhere between $800 to $10,000 or more. And these have been, I mean, just all across the world, they've been using these sales, and the family did not receive any compensation for that. And so it was ultimately saying like, oh, well, she was in the hospital, you know, we didn't believe that she really had any rights to it, you know. And it was just like, when we go into a hospital and they ask us to sign our patients' rights and responsibilities, like, do you read the information? Do you know your rights? That kind of thing. So it touches on a lot of those areas. And, you know, like I said, I give the reader the opportunity to give their thoughts on this, and hoping that we're journaling these things down in a way to put it in our heads and go back. Maybe we give these books to our kids one day, but we keep this history going on, and we start to develop a sense of awareness in our communities, where we can look back and say, oh, this was the problem. This is where this started at, and this is how we can move forward. Right. And so the Journal of African American Thoughts is what it's called. And I'm so excited about this book. It will touch down on Juneteenth. So I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get that book because like, just with what you were saying, it's like, I'm just kind of getting into like doing like a lot of research on history, on our history, and it's crazy because like both of the topics and the stuff that you just talking about, like I literally maybe about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago, like I literally like you watch a YouTube video about one subject and then they take you to another one. They were literally talking about some of that same stuff, and just even in like knowing our history and you putting it down where like as a journal where you can write about how you felt about it. I think that's going to be real powerful for the next generation because they can actually, 100 years from now, they may pick up one of your books and then they see their ancestors' name and they see what they thought about the situation. And like, I think that's real powerful. I think that's really good. So
thank you.
Most definitely gonna have to give me one of them books.
Yes. I will send you a copy on the house.
Yeah.
I will send you one.
That's what's up. So going back just a little bit for the We Speak Foundation, where do you see that in the next year or so? Like, what's the end game for the We Speak Foundation?
So I think that We Speak Foundation is constantly climbing and reaching new heights. I think our suicide prevention tour alone has given us a great window of opportunity to network with people across the world. Because when you think about now, like podcasts are literally like one of the new windows to being able to talk with people. Like I've been able to talk with people in Australia, people in England, and different things like that, because it gives us a global spectrum of what other people are thinking about and about the things that we're doing. And we're able to, kind of pull points and things like that and piggyback off of each other. But ultimately, we're touching the lives and setting the example that your trauma is not for you to always leave behind, but a tool to help those around you grow from. And I believe in God, and I believe that we all have a purpose. And good or bad in our eyes, these are blessings that help guide us to others. There are testimonies, and that alone will touch people in a way that we could never imagine. So I think it's never going to be about reaching everyone because you can't. I give the example of Jesus. Like Jesus did not, what I'm saying, even though he had a word to say, even though he had many miraculous things that he was able to touch on and show people, he didn't have everybody on his side. So I don't believe that we're going to touch everybody in the world. But for those people that are listening, for those people that actively want to understand where we're coming from, and those people that are touched by the things that we're saying in our vision, those are the people that we're going to be interacting with the most. Like you said, it might be 100 people in the room and you might get the audience or the attention of one person. And that's okay, because that one person is going to do what? They're going to talk to the next person. They're going to try to tell the next person about their experiences. So I think that that's where we're going, as far as like, with us, with our organization and how far we're going to go. It's going to be us being consistent about what we're doing. It's going to be consistent about working in the communities. It's going to be, not being scared, because I think a lot of times, like I talk about this in the book as well, when it talks about being a leader, like sometimes you look weird, sometimes you everybody's kind of looking at you kind of funny because you're doing something that is different. And so don't be afraid of that look, because like I said, I think that Jesus looked a little different. I think that, Mahatma Gandhi looked a little different in the beginning. Like, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Huey P. Newton, Angela Davis, all of these people, they started off looking kind of different at first, but as they continue with consistency, they were able to push those endeavors and reach heights that today that we look back on and we're amazed by. So I'm hoping that that's where we are.
That's right. Okay. All that was beautifully said. So before we get ready to, end this podcast, I want to allow you to get time to give our viewers your information, like where can they reach you at, your social media, where can they buy the book at? Because I gotta get one of them books for sure.
Awesome. So first thing is, like, definitely you can support us by going onto our website at wespeakfoundation.org. Read what we're about, read, watch the videos, subscribe to our programs, and join us when we volunteer to reach out about different projects and things like that. If you want to see something in your community, we'll try our hardest to, as a group, to help implement those ideas. But you can reach us out on Instagram at We Speak Foundation. Facebook, go and like the Kyerra Johnson page, which is for We Speak Foundation. And like I said, don't forget, go to wespeakfoundation.org, because we're here for the communities. We're here to support and ultimately, be a part and listen to us. We join the radio programs, different podcasts. So just listen to those, and that'll show you what we've been about and our consistency throughout the years.
Okay. I do have one more question, if that's okay with you.
Okay, yeah, it's fine.
A couple more questions, but this question I meant to ask earlier, because I know you advocate for the suicide prevention, and what's some advice you can maybe give me or give other people that may have been going through some things and they thought about suicide before, because I know a lot of time in our community with us, we go through things that, especially for men, we go through things that because we are men, we don't really talk about. And I don't know how high the rate of men in our community that suffer from depression and suicide. But can you give just a little bit of advice that if you are dealing with some depression or dealing with thinking about suicide, can you give a little bit of advice on what to do about that?
Yeah, definitely. Don't ever suffer in silence. Like men, female, like man, woman, don't ever suffer in silence, because 9 times out of 10, you're not the only person that's going through. Like, I always go back to Ecclesiastes, and everything that we're going through is as old as times. Like, it's happened before. You know what I'm saying? It's happened to somebody around you. And it's just like, if you never talk about it, you don't know. And to understand that your trauma is a portion of your life, get the help that you need, for those experiences to carry you in the ways that you'll be able to help other people. And it's just like, don't create bad habits because of trauma, because that literally just creates a cycle. And so it's just like kindness can bring us together, so can our pain. It's okay to be vulnerable and share your thoughts, but manage them in a way that you can still come out on top. Like, you still should be able to experience things that have hurt you and still use those things as a way to say that I am stronger because of this. I am stronger because I did have thoughts of suicide about this particular topic or this thing that happened in my life. I was an addict because of what happened in my life, and I overcame because of A, B, and C. And when you tell your story, especially like, neighborhoods and communities like we come from, you open up that gate for everybody to say, or that person to say, hey, man, I didn't even know, like, I was going through A, B, and C too. Now you have another person that you can talk to. And now that person doesn't have a fear to tell the next person and say, like, hey, man, somebody told me. And like, I'm just telling you, like, we set up and talk about blase, blase, blase. And this is where we at now. So we open up that gate. We create a new cycle versus creating a lot of the generational curses we see today with ongoing alcohol abuse, drug abuse, domestic violence, suicide, and homicide. And so I think using your trauma is going to be one of your greatest experiences if you use it correctly. It'll bring you out on top.
That's right. That's what's up, man. I liked everything that you said. We go through a lot. Us Black men, especially, we go through a lot with trying to, I guess, be hard or whatnot, and we don't like to talk about our traumas. But I'm understanding now, and just because I watch YouTube videos like continuously when I don't know too much about the topic. But I know me personally, I dealt with stuff in my past that I didn't particularly want to talk about. But like you said, when I got around people that went through the same thing, they smile all the time, but then sometimes they get a little vulnerable, and then we will talk about it. And I understand now that begins to help because like I was telling someone, I think yesterday, pressure burst pipes. So if you have a lot of pressure, a lot of things that's going on in your mind, and you don't like, sometimes we think talking don't help. But if you just kind of let it out and just kind of talk to someone about it, it does give a little relief. So I can testify to everything that you said, because just a little bit I dealt with some of it. So that was some great advice.
God bless you, like I said, for the things that you're doing. Like, I think you having this podcast and the work that you're doing in the community as well, like, you're going to continue to touch lives. Like, I see it, and I think it's wonderful. And I hope that you keep it up, because it looks great on our community when we step up like this.
That's right. That's right. So just one last question, and then I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. If you were to, God forbid, leave this earth on tomorrow, what's one bit of advice that you would give anybody? It don't necessarily have to be about the topic. It don't have to be, about suicide prevention. Just one piece of helpful advice that if we had a listener that just, whatever you're saying may end up touching their heart. What's one piece of advice that you want to give the world?
One thing is, no matter what you believe in, I'm gonna just use God because that's what I believe in. Put God first in your life and let him guide you through the traumas and things that you go through. But it's always going to be important to not just talk, but leave something behind. Like, I think about us writing books and doing podcasts and things like that. Like, the only way I know about Malcolm X is because he was able to leave something behind. All of these great people that we had in our communities, we have something to reflect on. Give your children, give your family, give your community something to go back and reflect on and say, like, wow, at the very end of the day, because that's what you want to do. I don't care if it's music, whatever it is, leave something behind so that people know who you are and what you stood for. Don't let anybody else tell your story. You tell your story. And I think that that's one of the most important things. And I think that that's because I lost my parents. Like, I didn't have a lot to go back and say, like, this is who they were as much. And so I think for my child and for my family, I always wanted to make sure that I could leave something for them to say, like, that's who my mama was. Like, that's who my sister was. And so I want my community to understand the same thing. Like, that's who Kyerra was.
That's what's up. That's awesome advice. That's awesome advice. And I'm glad you was able to come on the podcast on today to just, elaborate, talk about your book, about your foundation. So happy to have you here. I do want to let our listeners know that, you got her information, her social medias. Go to her page and for sure sign up. I'm signing up, and just be a help. Like she said, just leave something, be a help. And also you all can catch this podcast on all the podcast platforms, Spotify, Anchor, Google Play, Apple Play. You can find it everywhere. Most definitely go on YouTube. Check my podcast out. It's Bout the Business on YouTube. So we just gonna go ahead and end this episode.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to have you here. So we're gonna catch you next time. Again, this is Bout the Business, and we're gonna have